All right. We might get started. This talk is going to be a little bit different to the ones that you've probably heard today. And certainly it's going to be a little bit different to what you would consider to be traditional Agile. We're not interested in Agile IT. We're not interested in how to be better software developers. What we're interested in is how to be better in business. Now, let people come in and settle in. That's a very loud door.
All of them are. I think it's to embarrass students.
All right, so what this talk is about is not about Agile in IT, it's about how to be a better business, using the practices that we all learned as software engineers or developers or project managers or program managers. Business is different to software development. Okay. Software development is an art. It is not science, it is not a something that you can learn from a book. It's something you have to experience. Business is different. Yes, business is an art. Yes, you need to understand communication and talk to people. But the outputs of business are a lot more, they are a lot clearer over time. What we're going to talk about is a combination of Agile practices, Scrum, Kanban, test-driven development, extreme programming, a bit of feature-driven development in there as well. We're going to take these and we're going to go, well, we have a business. Our business is inefficient. Our business doesn't meet our customers' needs. It doesn't meet demand. Well, Agile's already solved that problem. So let's take that and apply it further. So, of course, shameless plug, I have a book. There's my book. Please have a look at it. If you're interested, buy it. End of shameless plug. Agile gives us an opportunity to improve business. Let me take you on a little bit of a story. In a second, once everyone else gets a seat. So, this story begins in 2007 in the lovely country of Singapore. Okay? Singapore is a very warm country. I was actually there last week. I got on the plane and the pilot said, coming into Melbourne, the temperature was going to be 4 degrees. And the entire plane just basically slumped. It's like, Singapore is a lovely country, all right? But it's very conservative in its business. Okay? It is a financial hub. They don't do a lot of IT in Singapore. If you want to do IT, you go to Malaysia, okay, or Philippines, or China. Singapore is known for finance. Now, hands up if you think finance is interesting. Okay, that's more hands than I was expecting. Finance, my personal opinion is finance is actually relatively boring. But we can apply the same concepts of Agile to finance, and we did. There was a financial services organization, I can't mention the name unfortunately, that they had a small IT shop. Their small IT shop did Agile. Agile was successful. Right? They were producing software faster than their competitors. Now, if you're in a financial services house, that literally means the difference between like losing money and making a very, very large amount of money. Okay? Financial services lives and dies on the speed of its development. So, the CEO of that organization went, if Agile works for IT, can it work for the rest of the organization? So, we sat down. I was brought in, at the time I was coaching them in their IT, how to use Agile. We sat down and we thought about what exactly can we apply from Agile into their organization. And I want to actually cover off in some detail how that worked. So what I want to start with is just give you a background. When we talk about corporate governance, when we talk about business management, there's a lot of things that have come before us. Right? We're not working in a vacuum, we're not making something up. Right? The OECD Principles of Corporate Governance. 20-page document, very dry, but very important to understand. You've got our good friends PDCA, PDSA, process control loops that OODA, John Boyd's in military, Orient, Observe, Decide, Act. These are all governance and management processes to make decisions. Deming, okay, was mentioned in the previous talk. Hands up if you know who Deming is. Most of you, good. Deming was a process optimization expert, amongst many other things. He was a statistician. He specialized in manufacturing. Okay? He worked in a large part in Japan. He won awards in Japan for process optimization. Deming came up with a series of concepts, the theory of constraints, okay? The theory of profound knowledge, PDSA, not PDCA, but PDSA. These are all concepts around how to build a better business. This is from the 1960s through to the 1980s. Okay? This is Agile before Agile even existed. No. I strongly recommend have a read of The New Economics by Deming, and the second book, my brain just completely fails. Google it, you'll figure it out, I can't remember. Theory of Profound Knowledge. CMMI, lovely stuff, CMMI. It is process for process's sake. Anyone work with CMMI? Yeah. It is intense. You work with an organization, if they're trying to get CMMI compliance, and you're trying to implement Agile, all of a sudden you've got roadblocks all down the path. So what we're trying to do now is change that. How do we optimize? How do we take these existing processes, different existing governance concepts, and apply them even further? So let's break this into 4 domains. I'm going to do them in a slightly different order to my book, but just forgive me for that. The first one is management. Okay? You are leaders, and if you're not now, you will be leaders in business. Leaders might just be a team leader, but you still have responsibilities to manage, to lead, to direct, to goal. So, let's look at how we can be better Agile managers across the board. If you're a CEO, I suspect not many of you are, but if you're a CEO, you have responsibilities for corporate governance, profit and loss, and the overall direction of the organization. If you're a team leader of a software development team, say 7 people, 7 plus or minus 2, then you have responsibilities over the management of those people to make sure that their welfare is being met, that their output leads towards the ultimate corporate goals of the organization. It doesn't actually matter whether you're CEO or whether you're or the most junior team leader. Those responsibilities are equivalent. Right? The scale is different, but the responsibilities are equivalent. Now, here's the trick. As a manager, as a leader, you are not responsible for delivering anything. Who is? Who is responsible for delivering?
People who do the work.
The people who do the work. You are responsible for facilitating that. Whether you're a CEO or whether you're a team leader, you are a facilitator. Okay? Your job is to remove impediments. Now, does this sound familiar? This is what we get taught in Scrum, in Lean. The role of the manager is to facilitate, not to do. Now, going back to our little story, this was a massive change for this financial services house because they had partners, they had senior advisors and consultants they were doers. They may have had teams of 20 under them, but they still were doers. So what we did is as part of a restructure process, we changed the way that they did their work. We made them facilitators. We took away their active delivery. Okay. Their responsibilities became to guide and direct, and to guide and provide direction. Does that make sense? Yeah. Who knows what this is? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In an employment situation, employment is down here. Okay? I go to work, let's say I work at Coles. I go to work so I can earn money, so I can pay rent, buy food, and live my life. Right? Safety and psychological. Employment is at the bottom of the hierarchy of needs. We want to change that around. I want you to come to work for me, not because I'm going to give you a paycheck, because there's been many studies that show that lower level engagement only gets you so far. I want you to engage. I want you to have a sense of ownership and a sense of empowerment in the work that you do. Agile talks about empowered teams. So if we're in business, let's invert that. I want you to work for me, not for money, but to be empowered. Another change that we want to try and make in an agile business rather than a traditional business. So the management mindset. Now, Agile teaches us that transparency, adapting to change, these are all important concepts, important processes that we need to go through. So let's apply those to our managers. Let's make it so our managers, their KPIs are based around adaptation to change. All right? Accepting failure. This organization had a failure KPI. Okay? Not to avoid failure, but to fail. Okay? You couldn't get your bonus, and trust me, in the financial services world, bonuses are very important. You couldn't get your bonus unless you could demonstrate failure.
I'd be rich.
That's sort of counterintuitive, and this was the hardest thing to sell, actually. And the hardest thing to sell was, how do we fail? We don't want to fail. But the truth was they were failing all the time. All right? They were making investments that were losing money. All right? There are other organizations. New Zealand Postal Group, I use a case study of them in my book. They've produced a massive Kanban board for their entire corporate strategy. Okay? So their board of directors and their sorry, not board, the executives of their organization come into this room, and across all the walls is this Kanban board which contains the corporate strategy. But for them, it's about tracking progress, tracking workflow, but also tracking failure. Okay? Measuring and making sure that failure is important. Staff welfare becomes important. We want our staff to feel valued. Go back to Maslow. It stops being about the bottom line. It starts being about empowering your staff and making your staff care about the bottom line. Okay? If your staff care about the outcomes of what they're producing, not just the outputs, not just the lines of code that they're producing, but the actual benefit. If they care about the outcomes, then as a manager, well, that's half your job done. Okay? So your responsibilities becomes facilitation, making sure that your staff and your staff welfare is met. Right. Second domain, customers. The role of the customer changes in Agile. We know this. We're all Agile practitioners. Okay? Customers become integrated into the work processes. We all agree on this? Yeah. Right. That's Agile 101. So if a customer is going to be integrated into the work processes, how does this work across the board? How does this work for HR? How does this work for your finance department? How does this work for your legal department? Step number one. Who is your customer? Here's the question. Who is your customer? Is the customer who is the person who buys a product from you?
Can be internal as well.
Yeah, can be internal. Okay. Internal, external customers. There's also consumers and customers. Okay. If I'm in charge of Apple, I have no idea who's in charge of Apple these days, but if I'm in charge of Apple and I make the iPhone, okay, and you guys all buy iPhones, are you my customers in an Agile sense? No. No. You have no input into that development process. You have no control or accountability for the delivery of the next iPhone. You are my consumers. You are my users. Okay? Yes, you may pay money for the privilege, but you are not my customers.
Is it the methodology or the mindset of the company?
Partly it's the mindset of the company, but also partly it's a matter of scale. If you're producing sort of a mass market product, then the person who is in charge, who is the product owner. Now that could be your sales manager, that could be a product manager, it could be someone external who's commissioned you to build that product. But the end users, yes, you want to engage them in the development process to make sure you're developing the right thing, but that's different to having them as your customer. So we have this concept in Agile Business Management of the customer representative. Okay? It's very, very similar to the product owner. In fact, it is pretty much the same as the product owner. But the customer representative is exactly that. They speak for the customer. Now, if you have a stack of consumers who have no direct authority, we nominate a representative, the product owner. The product manager, the sales manager. This becomes the customer. Right? But this is the key to all of it in terms of customers, in terms of engagement. Right? This is levels of trust. I want you to think about your customers. Right? Think about the people you work for. Right? Now, reference trust is the lowest level of trust. Like, I trust you because only because I trust you and you say I can trust him. Okay? That level of reference trust, okay, is I have no direct knowledge of why I'm trusting someone. Okay? If I'm in business with Andreas, okay, based on reference trust, then Agile's not going to work particularly well because we don't have a good, strong trust that will allow us to adapt to change. Okay? Second level, contract trust. The most common form of trust in business. I trust you because I have a contract with you that says you will deliver X. And if you don't, the penalty clauses start to apply. Now, everyone here probably had some exposure to contracts and contract level trust with your customer. Now, once again, think back to our Agile Manifesto. Contract negotiation is still important, but not as important as, come on, Agile Manifesto.
So delivering products, favoured product over documentation, build client communication.
Customer collaboration.
Yeah.
Customer collaboration over contract negotiation, or something along those lines. Right? So contract negotiation is important, but if you're an Agile organization, if you have an Agile customer, that is the barest level of trust. Knowledge trust is where we start to become Agile. Knowledge trust is where, look, we've worked together in the past, you delivered, so I trust you. Okay? That's when we can start to build a relationship. That's where we can start to collaborate. Okay? Then we get to the real agile trust. Identification and team. Okay? Team-based trust is all about we're partners. Okay? We will work together. We have common goals. In an agile organization, your strategy should be to convert all your customers to that team or that partner-based trust. Okay? If you're at that level of contract-based trust, then your customers, you're not agile. You can't be agile. Okay? And I've spoken about consumers, so I won't go into any sort of detail. So we're going to flip it around a bit, and I'll talk about the fourth domain. All right? So work. How do we deliver? Now, this is a really interesting case because every type of business works in a different way, but there are some commonalities. So if you're a government organization, if you're Centrelink, okay, then your customers is actually the federal government. Okay? The people who you provide services to are your consumers. Okay? So what are we doing for the federal government if we're Centrelink? Well, we are providing service delivery capability. Okay? That's our core. That's our core. How do we deliver service capability? How do we deliver service delivery in an agile way? Okay. We use a continuous delivery process. Okay. We can't increment. Okay. If I'm an HR department, right, HR is continuous. Right? A request comes in. Okay. Someone calls up and says, hey, we need to performance manage someone because they're not doing their job properly. Or we need to recruit someone because we've just had someone leave. Okay? That's not something that you can iterate. It's not something you can bring together and in a 2-week iteration, deliver. So here's where we get into two parts. Okay? Actually, I'll go forward one. I'll talk about this first. Continuous delivery are for things like HR, for things like sales and marketing, for processes such as legal advice. Okay? If I'm a team of lawyers and I'm providing advisory, then a call comes in, I take it, I deliver a service on demand. Okay? And for that, straight, we use lean Kanban processes. Flip it the other way around. Okay? Research and development, production delivery. Sales and market, if you're creating a tender, that's 6 weeks work. That's a project. That's iterations. Right? If you're legal and you're involved in a court case, that's big work. Okay? That's iterations. So we can take the two concepts, continuous and incremental, and apply them. But here's where we get to the importance of language. If I'm selling Agile to an organization that isn't IT, it isn't Google, it's a very traditional business. It's going to Agile because it sees Agile as a way of improving. And I start using terms like sprints, daily sprints, okay? Product owners, Scrum Masters. This is a turn-on. It really is a turn-on. I do work in Asia, and I use the word Scrum Master, and all of a sudden a CEO will look at me and go, we're not calling him a Scrum Master. Like, that's ridiculous. So we actually have to redefine common concepts within Agile. And this is a bit controversial. So we don't call them Scrum Masters, we call them facilitators, team facilitators. We don't call them sprints, we call them iterations. Right? We don't call them daily scrums, we call them day stand-ups. Not scrum of scrums, summary stand-ups or team stand-ups. Okay? Test-driven development becomes test-driven work. Pair programming becomes pair work, because these aren't software people. This is one of the problems with the Agile Manifesto. The word software is scattered through half a dozen of the principles and half a dozen of the values. Well, there's only 4 of them, but scattered through at least one of the 4 values. If I'm a financial services house, I don't care about the value of software. I care about the value of my product. So we have to change the terms to make it context sensitive. Context is important in business. Right? If you're selling someone something, that context has to be there. Does this make sense? Right? This is controversial. Right? You can't change the Scrum. You can't change the Agile Manifesto because it's copyrighted. They tried to change it and they said no. Right? So we need to take the concepts, redefine them slightly, use a different term that is context specific to business, and hope that people understand. Right. This is one of my favorite pictures. Okay. This comes from the New Zealand Post Group. Right. They're the postal service in New Zealand. Anyone here a Kiwi? Yeah, New Zealand Post Group, it's like Australia Post. Okay. They also have a bank as part of their group of companies, so it's a pretty comprehensive set of things. All right. New Zealand Post Group, Kanban boards everywhere, but they have this thing called the elephant in the room. Everyone knows what the elephant in the room is? It's something that's an issue that no one's talking about. Okay? They actually literally have, on a door, a gigantic elephant. If anyone has an issue or something that's not being discussed, they put a post-it note on the door, on the elephant, and says, I want to talk about this. This is one of the greatest ideas I've ever seen. Okay? Who's the audience for this? In New Zealand Post Group, the audience are the senior executives, okay? The CIO, the CEO, the group, the CEOs of each group. Okay? They're the ones who are using this. They're the ones who are using that Kanban board. They're the ones who are using this elephant on the door. They're the ones who are writing post-it notes and sticking it on the wall. Agile scales. Don't just mean scales to 100 developers or 1,000 developers. It scales to business. It scales to everyone in a business. Right? This is where things really change. An agile organization, the 4th domain is structure, context. Right? This financial services house, right? Staff of about 1,000, it's about 950 odd staff. Right? We brought it down. We changed it from being a hierarchical system, a hierarchical organization with partners and associates and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? They had, I think it was 7 layers of hierarchy. Well, 8 if you include sort of the contractors. All right? We changed it. We flattened it. They went from 8 down to 4. There was the CEO, there were the partners, okay? There were the team leaders, and there was everybody else. That was it, 1,000 people in that structure. We changed the responsibilities of the leaders. They became facilitators. Right? Their responsibility was to make sure that everyone under them understood the work that had to be done, the whys, not just how and what to do, but the whys. Getting that context, getting that understanding was key. So, the way this operated, right, the way we restructured was iterative. We used an agile process to restructure the organization. Right? In the first, our iterations were month-long. Right? That's just our thing. In the first month, we sat there and we went, all right, how are we going to change? So we identified some experiments, some ideas of things we could do. We brought in pair programming, okay, but we called it pair work. Okay? And this meant that all these financial accountants and stockbrokers and traders all started working together. And the quality of their trades went up by about 40%. That was in the first month. That was actually the biggest gain we got, but this is the point of Agile. We do the highest business value first. It always has been. Okay? After pair work, we introduced things like retrospectives. We introduced Kanban. By the, well, that was by the third month. We did value stream mapping and business process modeling to begin with to identify what our business process was. By the end of the 12th month, we had a complete restructure. We'd lost about 7% of the organization had resigned, and that was good. Okay. One, our efficiency had gone up anyway, so we're still making more money. But two, not everybody will work in an agile organization. If you're changing the way a business operates, some people like the status quo. We like, it's human nature to like the status quo. So what we do is we go, there are other businesses that operate the way you want to work. But on the other hand, we will now start recruiting for the people who want to work in our sort of organization. So we introduced Agile HR. We changed the way the recruitment process worked so that it focused on personality, culture, as well as just their technical ability. In our case, it was on the financial trading. Okay? So our business units transformed. Sales, marketing, customer liaison, all of these business units transformed from either waterfall, ad hoc processes, or no process control to agile rigor. I don't just mean ad hoc agile, I don't just mean hacking, I mean rigorous agile. Okay? We collected metrics, not onerous metrics, Ian was here in the last one, but we justified, we explained, we're not capturing this metric to prove are you a good employee. We're capturing it to empower you to become a good employee. We're capturing this information so you can make better decisions. Not so management can make better decisions, but so that you can make better decisions. We changed the way the board of directors operated. Board of directors is, they're the people who are voted by the stockholders and act in the stockholders' behalf as owners of the business. Okay? We changed the way the board of directors operated to be agile. Now, transparency is always key for any sort of corporate, in any sort of corporate governance. But we changed transparency. It wasn't only now about transparency around the financial state. It was the board of directors had access to our burn down charts. The board of directors had access to our Kanban boards. They could see progress. They could see what the strategic goals of the organization were and what was happening towards those goals. We finish in 5 minutes, correct?
Yep.
Yep. So, 2 last points. If you're going to convert an organization to agile, you also have to change the way finances operate. Okay? Yearly budgets are not agile. How can you take advantage of changing circumstances, new things in the market, if you are fixed to a yearly budget? Okay? So we changed to monthly budgets. Now the overhead of that is surprisingly low. The overhead of a monthly budget, because most months is pretty much the same as the last one. It's copy and paste, tick, tick, done. Okay. So it wasn't actually great overhead. It was a bit of an overhead for finance, but that was their job. But for the rest of the business, it didn't create an overhead. The other thing we put in place is contingency. Every team member, not just managers, not just teams, but every team member had a budget, a contingency. So within a team, for example, if their budget was 100,000, then they were allowed to spend up to 10%, if that was their contingency, above and beyond what their budget was, without approval. They had to justify it, okay? There's transparency, there's audit, it had to be a legitimate decision. But so this organization could really, really adapt. If someone had a good idea, okay, then they had the capability and the authority to spend a little bit of money to make it happen. And the last thing is looking at staff welfare. So that's things such as sustainable development, sustainable delivery. Right? Understanding that work, once your team is out of capacity, it's a pipeline. You put more work in, you either have to spend more money to increase the team, it'll take longer, or something will drop out. Okay? You can't have everything. Agile 101. Explaining this to the CEO is surprisingly hard to do. They expect, but we'll just ask them, we'll just make them work more. It's like, no, overtime is not sustainable. Okay? They can't work more. They are at capacity. We know they're at capacity because we have metrics to show they're at capacity. We're seeing the growth of the backlog. We're seeing the growth of their requirements against what they're delivering. We can see their efficiency and their process efficiency. We're measuring that information. So no, you can't have more. And Agile allows you to stand up to the CEO and say, you can't have more. All right, and that was the other big change. The role of the CEO became a facilitator, not a manager. The CEO of this financial services firm, they weren't sitting there and saying, thou shalt. They were saying, what do I need to do to make your job easy? Okay. What impediments can I get out of your way? And that is pretty much why we do Agile in business. Okay. Agile is not about IT. Agile is about culture, and Agile is about adapting to change. Business changes. So that's the end of all that rant and mind dump of how to do Agile in business. Does anyone have any questions about any of this in the 5 minutes we've got remaining?